The price of a secret is steep, and he left her pregnant. Stop. Before we delve into this heartbreaking yet ultimately hopeful journey, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments. How would you react if a single letter shattered your world, only to discover 18 years later that it was all a fabrication? Witness a daughter of immense intellect stepping into the spotlight, and a man of power finally confronting a truth that sends his life hurtling down a path he never could have foreseen. Part 1. The Cruel Disappearance or a Betrayal. Sarah Hayes was just 21, living a Spartan existence in a cramped room in downtown New York City. She meticulously juggled her fashion design classes during the day with grueling night shifts at a vintage boutique, all to keep a roof over her head. Her dreams were vast, filled with visions of becoming a celebrated designer, one whose name would one day be whispered with reverence in the hallowed halls of the fashion runways. She wasn't born into wealth, but she possessed a fierce ambition, and most importantly, she was deeply in love. Ethan Vance represented everything Sarah was not. Older, undeniably self-assured, and already a resounding success. At 27, he commanded his own investment firm, cultivated a reputation for making aggressive yet remarkably shrewd deals, and enjoyed the mentorship of a titan in the finance world who introduced him at every lavish party as the next financial prodigy. He possessed piercing brown eyes that seemed to dissect markets with ease and a charisma that made him utterly impossible to ignore. Their worlds collided on a rainy Thursday night when he walked into the boutique where Sarah was working. It was a twist of fate. She wasn't scheduled to be on that shift. Someone had called in sick at the last minute. Similarly, he wasn't supposed to be there shopping. He was merely killing time before a late dinner with potential clients. A dinner that could seal a lucrative deal. They struck up a conversation, and within a week, they were inseparable. He whisked her away to smoky jazz clubs in Greenwich Village, surprised her with spontaneous late-night excursions to Brooklyn in search of the perfect slice of pizza, and listened intently as she passionately described her designs, treating her as if she were already a design legend. For the first time, Sarah felt truly seen and believed in, without having to provide any tangible proof of her talent. When she discovered she was pregnant, a wave of terror washed over her. Yet, a small ember of hope flickered within her heart. Ethan had often mentioned his desire to have a family someday. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually. Maybe fate was simply accelerating their timeline. Without hesitation, she decided to tell him everything. She shared her news over breakfast in his impeccably decorated luxury apartment, her voice trembling with trepidation, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable, then asked for time to process the information. The following day he vanished. His phone number was disconnected without warning. His assistant informed her that he was traveling indefinitely and offered no further details. There were no more flowers, no more heartfelt texts, no more comforting answers to her desperate questions. Sarah was utterly devastated, her world crumbling around her. She called repeatedly, pleading for answers, until finally, someone at his firm delivered a blunt, heartless message. He does not want any further contact. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Ethan had received a letter. A cold, typed letter bearing her name, but not written by her hand. The author asserted that the child was not his and accused her of deceitfully trying to trap him. The letter implored him to leave immediately and never look back. The sender was his mother, Eleanor Vance, a woman with nerves of steel who had built a financial empire through ruthless determination and would not tolerate any distractions, especially from a struggling fashion student. Ethan believed the letter, or perhaps he chose to believe it, finding it a convenient escape. He didn't call her, didn't seek clarification, didn't even bother to ask a single question. He simply walked away, leaving Sarah utterly alone and heartbroken. She contemplated terminating the pregnancy, believing it would be the easier path. Her scholarship was already hanging by a thread, and her parents had severed ties with her when she chose to move to the city without completing her business degree. But when she heard the rhythmic thump of her baby's heartbeat during her first ultrasound, everything shifted. She moved out of her cramped room, sold her beloved sewing machine, and found a tiny, closet-sized studio apartment in a quiet town 3 hours north called Willow Creek. There was no vibrant fashion scene, no pulsing nightclubs, no familiar faces to offer support. She cried inconsolably for weeks, meticulously counted every penny to afford groceries, and sewed wedding dresses for other people in her living room just to scrape together enough money for prenatal vitamins. But she resolutely refused to surrender. This child would be loved unconditionally. This child would never experience the pain of abandonment. And no matter how much it hurt, she vowed to never speak his name again. If you were Sarah, would you have accepted Ethan's decision to abandon you so completely? What actions would you have taken after receiving such devastating news? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 2. The Silent Phenomenon, a Miracle in Winter. Maya was born on a frigid January night. The snow outside blanketing the windows in thick, silent layers, and the hospital lights flickering ominously during a fierce gust of wind that threatened to plunge the entire building into darkness. Sarah arrived alone, her body hunched over in agonizing pain, her coat soaked and clinging to her. The nurse gently inquired if the father was expected to arrive. Sarah simply shook her head, unable to utter his name, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in months. The labor was prolonged, utterly exhausting, and profoundly lonely. There were no celebratory flowers, no anxious grandparents pacing the halls, no proud couple to cut the umbilical cord together. But when they gently placed the tiny girl on Sarah's chest, the world outside faded away. The baby had delicate fair hair already forming on her head, and when she opened her eyes, they were dark, deep, and unmistakably brown. Not Sarah's color, not her family's color. They were his. For a moment, Sarah couldn't catch her breath. She named her Maya without hesitation. It was a name she had always cherished, a name that evoked strength and elegance. Maya Hayes, no hyphen, no second last name, no trace of the man who had chosen to be absent. The following days unfolded in a blur of unrelenting noise and fleeting moments of silence. Maya cried frequently and slept very little. Sarah learned to function on a mere 3 hours of broken sleep, juggling feedings with freelance sewing assignments in a desperate attempt to make ends meet. The apartment felt impossibly small, and the ancient heater only worked intermittently, requiring a swift kick to the side and a whispered plea to coax it back to life. The frigid winter air seeped in beneath the windows, but she swaddled Maya in layers of second-hand blankets and held her close through every storm. Sometimes, she would whisper stories to her of a beautiful future where they lived by the ocean, surrounded by ceiling-high bookshelves filled with endless adventures. She wasn't sure if those dreams would ever materialize, but they provided a sense of warmth and hope in the darkest of times. By the time Maya reached her first birthday, she could maintain eye contact longer than most toddlers. By 2, she was assembling puzzles with a speed and dexterity that astonished the daycare staff. Sarah meticulously recorded every milestone in a worn leather notebook, alongside rough sketches of clothing designs she never had the time to bring to life. She worked tirelessly throughout the day, picked Maya up in the evening, and stayed up late into the night, meticulously managing the bookkeeping for a local plumbing company whose owner paid her under the table in cash. Money was always scarce, a constant source of stress and worry. There were days when Sarah went without eating so that Maya wouldn't have to experience hunger. She clipped coupons religiously, bought everything secondhand, and learned to stretch a single grocery bag to last an entire week. But somehow, every time she saw Maya laughing or reading aloud from one of her beloved storybooks, she felt that life was still offering her something sacred. Her daughter was happy, endlessly curious, and utterly fearless. And that was everything. A quiet, unassuming miracle. The town of Willow Creek was small and undeniably sleepy, but the local library quickly became their second home. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, noticed early on how rapidly Maya devoured the storybooks and gently introduced her to older children's science books, recognizing her exceptional intellect. Sarah used her limited breaks to research public school ratings and after-school enrichment programs. She couldn't afford private education, but she was determined to build a solid foundation for Maya, brick by painstaking brick. When Maya entered elementary school, her teachers immediately recognized her as gifted. She was quiet but incredibly observant, gentle but fiercely driven. She never asked about her father, not once. Sarah wondered if she was simply waiting for the right moment or if, somehow, she already intuitively understood the situation. On every birthday, Sarah gave her a handmade gift, a fabric storybook filled with their adventures, a dress she tailored from scratch with love, or a box filled with drawings of their cherished memories. She had nothing extravagant to offer, but she gave her everything that truly mattered, her unwavering love and devotion. As the years passed, the apartment remained small, but their lives expanded exponentially. Maya blossomed into the girl that other kids admired, not because she was popular or sought attention, but because she wasn't afraid to be different and to embrace her unique qualities. She joined the high school science club, began tutoring math in the 7th grade, and devoured medical journals for fun in the 8th. Sarah watched in quiet awe and immense pride. She had built a life on broken dreams and sheer determination, held together by metaphorical duct tape, but somehow, she had produced something truly golden. Her daughter was brilliant, a shining star in their small town, and although the world hadn't always been fair to her, Maya had transformed it into something beautiful through her unwavering spirit and intellect. By the time Maya turned 17, she had become a quiet phenomenon in Willow Creek. She was the kind of student that teachers talked about with admiration in the staff room, not just for her exceptional intelligence, but for the quiet grace and unwavering integrity with which she carried herself. She never sought attention, never boasted about her accomplishments, and never posted selfies or flaunted awards online. Instead, she accumulated knowledge with the same fervor that others accumulated followers on social media, and she behaved with a maturity and grace far beyond her years. Her days were spent moving seamlessly between advanced classes, volunteer tutoring sessions, science fairs, and late-night study marathons in the same quiet corner of the local library where she had first learned to read. Despite the immense weight of expectations, Maya never seemed burdened or overwhelmed. She organized her time with military precision. Her small room was covered in whiteboards, sticky notes filled with scholarship deadlines, and inspiring quotes she had discovered. She lived in a world of complex equations, meticulously researched papers, and quiet, unwavering ambition. Yet, for all her intense academic focus, there was a sweetness to her, a warmth and genuine compassion inherited from her mother. She made time for the shy students, defended anyone who was being bullied, and always made a point of thanking the janitors by name, treating everyone with respect and kindness. It was her chemistry teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, who first noticed that she was working on something far more ambitious than a typical school project. In the back of the science lab, Maya had set up a makeshift workstation where she was developing a low-cost, biodegradable filtration system using natural enzymes. Her goal, she explained one afternoon while cleaning beakers, was to create something that could be used in underdeveloped areas with limited access to clean water, a resource that many take for granted. It had started as a simple idea for a local competition, but the deeper she delved into the research, the more determined she became to make her vision a reality. Mr. Rodriguez, stunned by the depth of her research and her unwavering dedication, submitted her project to a state-level innovation showcase without her knowledge, believing in her potential. When she won first place, representatives from national science foundations took notice, recognizing the transformative potential of her project. One of them, a woman named Carla Perez, who worked with a network of philanthropic investors, introduced herself to Maya after the ceremony and asked if she had ever considered applying for the National Youth Innovation Summit in New York City. It was an annual, invitation-only event attended by university scouts, venture capitalists, and investors eager to back promising talent before they even entered college. Maya had never even heard of it. She smiled politely and simply said, "Thank you," overwhelmed by the opportunity. But the moment she arrived home, she spent hours researching the summit, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that the cost of the trip alone would be impossible for her mother to cover on her meager income. But Sarah didn't hesitate for a moment. That very night, she took on another late-night bookkeeping client and applied for local travel grants, determined to make her daughter's dream a reality. Within 3 weeks, everything was meticulously arranged. The trip to New York would be the first time Maya had ever left the state. She carefully packed her few belongings in a second-hand suitcase and transported her project components in a box reinforced with duct tape, ensuring its safety. Sarah couldn't afford to accompany her, so she hugged her tightly at the bus station, her voice trembling with emotion as she whispered, "No matter what happens there, remember that you know exactly who you are, and that will always be enough." Part 3. The Fatal Glance, the Stage. New York City was a completely different world than anything Maya had ever experienced. Towering glass buildings stretched impossibly high into the clouds, their surfaces reflecting the bustling city below. The air crackled with ambition and relentless energy, and everywhere she looked, there were people who seemed to radiate power and unwavering purpose. The summit was held in a lavish hotel ballroom, filled with rows of booths showcasing innovative projects, blinding stage lights, clicking cameras, and a sea of strangers in impeccably tailored suits asking complex questions. For the first few hours, Maya felt almost invisible, lost in the crowd. Her station was located in a quiet corner of the room, far from the main presentation area, where the spotlight shone brightest. The booths closer to the center were occupied by students from elite private academies and prestigious international programs, kids who confidently discussed multimillion-dollar startups and had mentors with famous last names. She felt undeniably out of place in her second-hand shoes and thrift store blazer, but she resolutely reminded herself why she had come and the importance of her work. When the judges finally arrived at her table, she spoke without relying on notes, her voice clear and confident. She meticulously explained the underlying science, the scalability of the project, the cost-effectiveness of her filtration system, and the potential for global impact, her passion shining through. She didn't try to promote herself as a brand or create a false image. She simply spoke the truth, driven by her unwavering belief in her project. By the end of her demonstration, one of the judges looked at her intently for a long moment and asked, "Where did you say you were from?" Throughout the day, more and more people stopped by her booth, drawn in by the buzz. Someone must have spread the word about her innovative work. A professor from MIT stopped by and left his business card, impressed by her research. A woman from a Boston institute asked if she would be willing to present her project at an international summit in the spring. And a tech investor invited her to apply for a summer research fellowship, recognizing her exceptional potential. The murmur around her station grew louder, not because of a flashy marketing campaign or a celebrity endorsement, but because the work was undeniably real and impactful. Maya's project was different. It wasn't designed to impress potential investors. It was designed to make a tangible difference in the world, to address a critical need. By late afternoon, taking a brief break near the refreshment table, she overheard a group of elegantly dressed guests discussing the future of female inventors and the vital importance of early investment in promising talent. She didn't realize that one of those men, standing with his back to her, dressed in a dark gray suit and sipping a drink, was Ethan Vance, her father. He hadn't seen her yet, and she had never laid eyes on him. They were in the same room for the first time in 18 years, and neither of them had any idea what was about to happen, the course their lives were about to take. What role did Sarah's self-sacrifice and unwavering dedication play in Maya's success? If you were Maya and suddenly realized that the man standing in front of you was your father, what would you do? Give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 4. The Unburied Truth. Ethan Vance didn't typically attend youth innovation gatherings. His demanding schedule was filled with corporate boardrooms, high-stakes international negotiations, and lucrative tech investments. But this particular event had piqued his interest after one of his junior partners mentioned a growing list of unusually talented students presenting groundbreaking solutions to real-world problems. Vance Tech Ventures had recently launched a philanthropic arm focused on early-stage education investments, aiming to give back to the community. And though Ethan rarely handled the outreach himself, something about this trip to New York had compelled him to attend in person. He rationalized it as a strategic move, an opportunity for increased visibility, a few carefully chosen PR photos, and maybe one or two promising names to keep an eye on in the future. What he didn't expect was for the day to take such an abrupt and life-altering turn. The ballroom was crowded, buzzing with youthful energy, bright-eyed ambition, and the low murmur of networking. He shook hands, nodded politely through presentations, and politely declined interview requests. He simply wasn't in the mood for small talk or superficial interactions. Something in the room felt heavy, an unsettling undercurrent he couldn't quite pinpoint. Perhaps it was simply fatigue, or perhaps it was that familiar feeling he sometimes experienced in the quiet moments between meetings, the nagging sense that something was missing and had been for a very long time, a void he couldn't quite fill. He was midway through a conversation with a senior university consultant when he noticed a small gathering forming in one of the back corners of the exhibit hall. He could have easily ignored it, as he usually did, but a familiar quality in the voices drew his attention. Not familiar because he recognized them, but because of their tone, quiet, precise, and filled with unwavering purpose. Someone was explaining a complex scientific mechanism in a way that even a non-scientist could easily understand. His eyes drifted over to the group, and that's when he saw her. The girl was standing next to a handmade display, nothing flashy or extravagant, just carefully organized research, meticulously drawn diagrams, and a table featuring a series of small filtration models. She was confidently explaining something to a listening panel, and there was a subtle confidence in her posture, the kind that wasn't rehearsed or coached. Ethan didn't know why, but his heart gave a strange, discordant tug, an unsettling feeling he couldn't explain. She had long fair hair pulled back in a loose braid, and as she turned slightly to adjust her equipment, he saw her face clearly. For a moment, everything inside him froze, her eyes deep and unmistakably brown, instantly captivating him. She looked up as she spoke to one of the judges, and Ethan felt something old and buried deep within him rush to the surface, threatening to overwhelm him. He moved forward, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, his mind struggling to process the information. There was no denying it. Her features were hauntingly familiar, a stark reminder of the past. She didn't resemble him in structure, but her eyes, her unwavering focus, her quiet intensity, and the slight tilt of her head when she paused to think. He knew those patterns intimately. He had seen them before, 18 years ago in a hospital room he had never visited, a goodbye he had never realized he had made. She looked like Sarah. He moved through the crowd, drawn by a force he couldn't fully understand or control. When he reached the edge of the group surrounding her booth, he saw her name displayed prominently on the screen. Maya Hayes. Not Vance, just Hayes. He stumbled back slightly, almost as if he had been physically struck by the revelation. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in almost 2 decades, and he had actively forced himself not to think about it, burying it deep within the recesses of his mind. Sarah Hayes, the girl he had once loved deeply, the one he had thought about countless times in silence, the one he had left behind after receiving that devastating letter. Cold, heartbreaking, final. A letter that claimed the child wasn't his, that she had lied to him, and that she wanted nothing from him. But now, standing in front of this extraordinary 18-year-old girl, Ethan realized something he had stubbornly refused to believe for years. That letter had been a lie, a carefully constructed fabrication designed to deceive him. He didn't need a DNA test to confirm his suspicions. He didn't need any further confirmation. He was looking directly into the eyes of his daughter. Panic washed over him, colliding with guilt, shock, and something even heavier, a profound sense of grief. He had lost everything. The first steps, the first words, the first day of school. Her entire life had passed without him, a gaping void he could never fill. And now here she was, standing right in front of him, brilliant and serene, and she didn't even know he existed, completely unaware of the connection they shared. As the crowd began to disperse, she moved toward the refreshment table, walking past him without even a glance. Why would she even look at him? He was just a stranger to her, someone she had never seen before. And then he saw her, Sarah. She was standing across the room, partially hidden behind one of the grand flags, watching Maya with the quiet pride of a devoted sentinel. Her hair was shorter now, tucked neatly behind one ear, and her posture was straighter, reflecting her strength and resilience. But it was undeniably her, the same Sarah he had fallen deeply in love with all those years ago, except her eyes now held a depth and weariness he had never witnessed before, a testament to the hardships she had faced. Their eyes met, and the connection was immediate and undeniable. It lasted only a second, but in that brief second time seemed to collapse, and all the years he had spent pushing her out of his mind, all the pain he thought he had buried, and all the choices he had defended came rushing back with a force that nearly knocked the air from his lungs. She said nothing, offering no sign of recognition. She didn't cry, didn't scream, or run away in anger. She simply looked at him, her gaze steady and unwavering, as if daring him to move, daring him to speak and break the silence. Her expression wasn't filled with hatred or anger, but it was something far more profound, aged, weary, and resigned. He took a step toward her, compelled by an invisible force, but she moved away, not dramatically or with any outward display of emotion, just with the quiet resolve of someone who had spent far too long waiting for something that had never come. Ethan stood there, surrounded by success, by money, by everything he had always believed he wanted in life. And all he could think was that he had lost the two people who could have given his life true meaning. His daughter was here, alive, extraordinary, and he was nothing more than a ghost in her world, a distant memory she didn't even know existed. For the first time in 18 years, Ethan Vance felt the full weight of what he had run away from, the magnitude of his mistake. And for the first time, he didn't know if he had the right to walk back into their lives and disrupt the peace they had carefully built. What do you think made Ethan believe his mother's letter without question? If you were Sarah, how would you have reacted to seeing Ethan at the summit after all these years? Share your opinions in the comments below. Part 5. The Confession and the Crack. Ethan left the gala that night in a state of numb disbelief, his mind reeling from the revelations he had just experienced. He didn't stay for the keynotes or the closing reception, unable to face the crowds. He spoke to no one on the way out, completely ignoring the investors and journalists who tried to shake his hand or pass him their business cards. He barely remembered walking through the opulent hotel atrium or getting into the waiting black car, his mind consumed by his thoughts. He spent the entire night in his luxury penthouse, sleepless and restless. He didn't work, didn't even turn on his computer. He just sat in silence with a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. Thoughts came in relentless waves, each one more painful than the last. Images of Sarah from years ago flooded his mind, the sound of her infectious laughter, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams, the day she had nervously told him she was pregnant, her voice filled with hope and fear. Then the letter reappeared in his memory, its words searing themselves into his mind, the paper he still remembered holding in his trembling hand like a death sentence. Every word carefully designed to kill a future he hadn't even realized he desperately wanted. At the time, it had seemed rational to leave the most logical course of action. He had just started making a name for himself in the cutthroat world of finance, and he didn't believe he was ready for the responsibilities of a child, let alone the potential scandal that could derail his career. But now, 18 years later, he finally understood that logic had been nothing more than a mask, a convenient excuse to hide behind. Fear had ultimately made the decision for him, and someone else's lies had sealed his fate, leaving him with a lifetime of regret. The next morning, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He returned to the source of the pain. He opened the locked drawer of his office where he kept old documents, files he never touched, and fragments of the life he had buried long ago, a life he had tried desperately to forget. The letter was still there, folded neatly and yellowed by time, a constant reminder of his past mistakes. He read it again, his heart pounding in his chest. The tone, the phrasing, it didn't sound like Sarah at all. It was cold, unemotional, and devoid of any nuance or warmth. Something was undeniably wrong with the letter. At the bottom, the signature was typed, not handwritten, raising further suspicions. His stomach churned with a mixture of guilt and realization. He immediately called his former assistant, a woman named Angelica, who had worked closely with his mother during that tumultuous time. When she answered the phone, he didn't waste time on pleasantries or formalities. "Angelica," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "did my mother write Sarah's letter all those years ago?" There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end of the line, then a heavy sigh. I waited 18 years for you to finally ask me that question, Ethan. And then, the truth poured out in a torrent of long-held secrets. Eleanor Vance, elegant, calculating, and ruthlessly ambitious, had intercepted the real letter Sarah had written, a letter filled with fear, hope, and honest emotions, and had replaced it with a forged message carefully designed to sever all ties between Ethan and Sarah. She had viewed the relationship as a threat to Ethan's carefully constructed future, an inconvenience he couldn't afford if he wanted to reach the pinnacle of success. Angelica had known the truth all along, but she had remained silent for fear of retaliation from Eleanor, choosing to protect herself. Now, after nearly 2 decades of silence, the truth had finally surfaced, shattering the carefully constructed facade. Ethan hung up the phone and felt his knees weaken beneath him, overwhelmed by the weight of his mother's deception. It was far too late to undo the years of separation, too late to go back and witness Maya's first steps, celebrate her birthdays, or sing her lullabies to soothe her to sleep. But perhaps it wasn't too late to try to bridge the gap, to show them both that he hadn't walked away knowingly, that he had been wrong, but not uncaring. He tried to contact Sarah, desperate to explain, but she didn't answer his calls. Emails went unreplied, lost in the digital void. It wasn't just anger or resentment he sensed, but something deeper and more profound, a fierce protectiveness. She wasn't protecting herself from him anymore. She was protecting Maya from the potential disruption and pain he could cause, and he couldn't blame her for wanting to shield her daughter. So, he started from the outside, taking small, calculated steps. He anonymously funded the remainder of Maya's scholarship through a silent donor agreement, ensuring she had the financial support she needed to continue her education. He contacted the summit organizers and requested that her project be featured prominently in their global bulletin, increasing its visibility to potential investors and collaborators. Through an old professor at MIT, he discreetly secured her an invitation to a prestigious high school graduate research program, providing her with valuable opportunities to advance her scientific knowledge. Every move he made was strategic but invisible, with no signature, no recognition, and no expectation of gratitude. His only goal was to help Maya succeed and to quietly support her from afar, hoping that one day, he might have the chance to explain the truth and ask for forgiveness. Ethan didn't want a parade. He wasn't trying to buy his way back into Maya's life with empty gestures. All he craved was to pave the way, ensuring every door she deserved swung wide open. Night after night, fueled by a potent mix of guilt and burgeoning pride, he dove into her work. He devoured every published paper, dissecting her research, tracing the intricate pathways of her thought process. What he unearthed left him breathless. Maya wasn't just intelligent. She was a force of nature, a revolutionary. She possessed an engineer's mind, spoke with a humanitarian's heart, and carried herself with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never been told, "You can't." It was Sarah's masterpiece. She had sculpted this remarkable young woman single-handedly, without support, without a safety net. And now, the world was clamoring to invest in the very person she had poured her life into nurturing. The hardest part was the self-imposed exile. The urge to pick up the phone, introduce himself, explain the years of silence, was almost unbearable. But how could he? What could he possibly say? I'm your father. I vanished because I was gullible enough to believe a lie, too cowardly to seek the truth. It was pathetic. Excuses were cheap. 18 years of silence weren't. So he waited, a silent guardian angel. He continued to orchestrate opportunities, always anonymously, always carefully. He arranged meetings with influential mentors, scheduled lunches with women who were titans in science and technology, hoping their stories would ignite her passions even further. He even discreetly pushed for her work to be considered by the Global Science Awards Committee for Youth. Every time her name surfaced in an article or echoed in a podcast, he felt a surge of pride so intense it was almost painful. Weeks turned into an agonizing blur before Sarah finally broke the silence. A single, stark line in an email. I know it was your money. I know that you know. Do not contact her. He stared at the message, the words hanging in the air like a judgment. It wasn't cruel, but it was resolute. It was a clear boundary drawn in the sand. Yet, that very week, a LinkedIn request arrived. From Maya. His heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't know how she had found him, what she suspected, or if it was simply a random connection. But it was there, staring back at him, an invitation, a challenge. His hand trembled as he clicked, accept. It was the smallest of openings, a mere crack in the wall he had built around himself. But to Ethan, it felt like gulping down air after drowning in regret for years. For the first time since that devastating night in New York, he allowed himself a sliver of hope. Maybe the road to reconciliation wasn't completely blocked. Maybe redemption didn't begin with grand, theatrical gestures, but with quiet presence, unwavering patience, and the painful truth. Asterisk, do you think Sarah should have told Maya about her father sooner? What does Maya's decision to contact Ethan reveal about her character? Share your thoughts. Part 6. The inevitable meeting. Maya wasn't expecting fireworks. The connection request was a quiet, almost involuntary act, driven more by a nagging curiosity than any concrete plan. She had stumbled upon his name in an article discussing anonymous donors who were champions of youth innovation. And though she couldn't pinpoint exactly how she knew, something about the way the article described the man's involvement resonated on a deeply personal level. A fleeting image flashed through her mind. A man in a dark gray suit with weary eyes, watching her booth from across the room at the summit weeks earlier. He seemed like he had seen a ghost. At the time, she had dismissed it as nothing. But now, after a series of curious incidents, a peculiar comment from one of the judges, the sudden surge of her project's visibility in circles far beyond her reach, the pieces began to fall into place. The feeling that someone was watching out for her, a silent benefactor, was no longer just a vague intuition. It was real, and her gut told her it was him. When he accepted her request, she resisted the urge to message him immediately. Instead, she meticulously scrutinized his profile, scrolling through his impressive career, his prestigious university credentials, the long list of companies he had single-handedly built from the ground up. There was no mention of family, no personal photos, no hobbies. The man was all business, a carefully constructed facade. But the deafening silence in his biography spoke volumes. She kept her discovery to herself for a few days, a secret she guarded closely. Her mother had been unusually withdrawn lately. She came home from work, her shoulders slumped with fatigue, her eyes clouded with worry. She lingered longer than usual, sifting through old photographs, folding laundry with a mechanical precision that betrayed her distracted mind. Maya refrained from asking questions. She had always been able to sense when her mother was carrying a heavy burden. It had always been just the two of them, a tight-knit unit against the world, and Sarah had never lied to her. But this felt different. This was the first time Maya felt a deliberate withholding, a careful dance around a hidden truth. The moment of revelation arrived unexpectedly, on a rainy Saturday night. The rain lashed against the windows, a relentless rhythm mirroring the turmoil within her. Maya sat in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a crucial scholarship application, while Sarah stood at the sink, meticulously hand-washing dishes. Without looking up, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper, "I think I know who my father is." Sarah's hands froze in the soapy water. She remained motionless for a full 5 seconds, a tableau of stunned silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned off the faucet and reached for a towel, her back still turned to her daughter. "Say that again," she whispered, her voice tight with apprehension. Maya closed her laptop, the click echoing in the sudden stillness. "I saw him at the summit. I didn't know it then, but I think he's the one who's been helping me. The anonymous funding, the research connections, it all started after New York. I recognized his name in a donor article, and then I found him online. His name is Ethan Vance. Isn't it?" Sarah finally turned around, her face pale but remarkably composed. Her eyes searched Maya's, a silent plea for understanding. Then, something within her seemed to collapse, the fight draining out of her. "Yes," she said. the word falling into the room like a dropped glass, fragile, final, impossible to ignore. Maya remained silent for a long moment. She had rehearsed 1,000 versions of this conversation in her head, each one a carefully constructed argument, a desperate plea for honesty. But none of them felt right now, faced with the raw vulnerability in her mother's eyes. Finally, she asked the only question that truly mattered. Did he know about me? Sarah sank into a chair across from her and released a slow, shaky breath. No, not really. Not at the time. And then, she began to unravel the tangled threads of the past, the truth spilling out like a torrent long suppressed. The love story, the whirlwind romance, the sudden, inexplicable silence, the forged letter, the cruel betrayal, not just of a couple, but of a future. She told Maya about the night she lost the light, alone and terrified, about the years of grinding double shifts, the constant struggle to make ends meet, and the conscious choice to never taint her daughter's life with bitterness or resentment. She hadn't known the full truth until recently, the extent of the deception. But she had suspected for a long time that something didn't add up, that pieces of the puzzle were missing. And when she saw him at the summit, everything inside her had screamed confirmation. The man she once loved had been manipulated, lied to, but he had also allowed himself to vanish without a fight. Maya listened without interrupting, her face an impassive mask. But beneath the surface, her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic alarm bell. All this time, she had lived without a father, not because he was dead or unknown, but because he had been deceived, because he had believed a lie, because he hadn't questioned it. The hurt wasn't a sharp, stabbing pain. It was a slow, dull ache, like something precious being ripped from her chest thread by thread. "So, he knows now," she finally said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That I'm his daughter." Sarah nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, he found out after the summit. He's the one who funded your program. He's been trying to contact me. I wouldn't let him talk to you. I didn't know if it would help or simply inflict more pain." Maya stood up and walked toward the window. She didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't lash out. She simply stood there, arms crossed tightly, watching the rain streak the glass in long, shaky lines, blurring the world outside. "Why didn't he try harder back then?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Even after he walked away, even if the letter was convincing, why didn't he investigate? You were pregnant with his child. Why wasn't that enough?" Sarah shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "I ask myself that every day. But I think the answer is simple if not easy to accept. He was afraid, perhaps blinded by his ambition, and certainly burdened by pride. And he allowed someone else to dictate his life for him, a choice he has clearly come to regret." Maya didn't reply. That night, sleep eluded her. She reread everything she could find about Ethan Vance, dissecting his early career, tracing his meteoric rise in the tech world, studying his reputation for calculated decisions and emotional detachment. She tried to picture him as a scared, ambitious young man, overwhelmed by the prospect of fatherhood. And she tried to imagine him now, consumed by guilt and regret, desperately trying to atone for his past mistakes, without knowing how. The next day, she composed a text message. It was short, cautious, and direct, a carefully worded olive branch. "I know who you are. I know what happened. I don't know yet what I want from you, but I think we should talk." She stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the send button. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve held firm. Somewhere deep inside her, something old was stirring, a faint flicker of possibility. It wasn't hope exactly, not yet, but the potential for it. And that, she realized, was enough to begin. If you were in Maya's shoes, would you forgive your mother for keeping the truth from you? What are your thoughts on Ethan's actions after discovering the truth? Share your perspectives. Part 7. The Redemption Journey. A meeting in the park. Ethan reread the text message a fifth time before he dared to believe it was real. He sat in his sterile, glass-walled office, surrounded by the quiet hum of a world that no longer held the same allure it once had. His phone buzzed incessantly with market alerts, calls from his harried assistant, and reminders of meetings he was already running late for. But none of it registered. Not in this moment. The message had come from Maya. Not Sarah, not a lawyer representing her, not some distant relative acting as an intermediary. Maya herself, the young woman whose face had haunted his dreams since the night of the summit. The woman who possessed a mind sharper than most and eyes that held a spark of his own. She had reached out, extended a tentative invitation. The words were cautious, fragile, but undeniably open. She wanted to talk. He stared at the blank reply field, his mind a complete void. For a man who had built empires with his words, who could sway boardrooms and captivate investors with a single, carefully crafted sentence, Ethan found himself paralyzed, utterly tongue-tied. There was no playbook for this, no winning formula, no carefully rehearsed script. This was uncharted territory, a landscape of raw emotion and uncertain terrain. He finally typed a simple, heartfelt response. I would be honored to speak with you, whenever and however you feel ready. 3 agonizing days crawled by before she replied again. He resisted the urge to press her, to bombard her with apologies or declarations of remorse. He spent the time immersed in long repressed memories, forcing himself to confront the years of shame and regret. The image of Sarah, alone and vulnerable, in a snow-covered hospital, the sound of a child's laughter he had never heard, the lost birthdays, the forgotten school projects, the scraped knees, the college applications, all the countless moments he could never reclaim. But he refused to allow the crushing weight of guilt to shatter him. He used it as fuel, a catalyst for change. He finally understood that redemption wasn't a single, grand act of contrition. It was a series of 1,000 silent offerings, presented patiently, sincerely over time. Maya finally suggested they meet in a park near the university campus she had recently chosen to attend. It was early spring, the kind of day where the trees were beginning to awaken from their winter slumber, and the air carried the first faint scent of blossoms, a promise of new beginnings. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He deliberately avoided wearing his usual power suit, his expensive watch, his impeccably tailored coat. Instead, he opted for a simple sweater and jeans, as if shedding the man he had been and trying to embody the man he desperately wanted to become. He saw her before she saw him. She stood near the entrance, scanning the park, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked exactly like himself, he noticed with a pang, focused, thoughtful, slightly guarded. Her shoulders were straight, her walk purposeful, her face unreadable. He sat on the bench across from her, carefully lacing his fingers together in his lap, a conscious effort to appear calm and composed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken words and years of regret. "I really don't know how to do this," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the ground. "Neither do I," he replied softly, his gaze unwavering. "But I'm here." She looked up at him, her gaze steady and direct, searching for a hint of deception. "Why didn't you come back? Even after you walked away, even if the letter was convincing, why didn't you investigate? Why didn't you try?" It was the question that had been burning inside her since the moment she learned the truth, the question that demanded an answer, and it deserved nothing less than complete honesty. Ethan didn't evade it. He didn't blame his mother, didn't point to the chaos of his burgeoning career. He made no excuses, offered no justifications. Instead, he looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping with the weight of his confession, and said, "I was afraid, and I was selfish. I allowed a letter to dictate everything because it gave me an easy out, an excuse not to face the daunting possibility of being a father before I felt ready. I told myself it was best for you, for your mother, for my career. But the truth is I was weak. I was young and arrogant, and I thought I could outrun the guilt. But it followed me anyway, a constant shadow, a silent reminder of my failure." Maya didn't speak for a long moment, her face an impassive mask. But her eyes glistened faintly in the soft morning light, betraying the turmoil within. The wind whispered through the branches above them, carrying the scent of spring and the weight of untold stories. "I don't want a perfect explanation," she finally said, her voice low and steady. "I just want honesty. That is all I can offer you now," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "And time, however much it takes. I know I can't just show up after 18 years and expect anything. I just want you to know that now, I see you completely, and I am incredibly proud of who you are, whether you ever call me father or not." She looked away, blinking rapidly, her composure momentarily faltering. For the first time since they had met, something in her seemed to loosen, a subtle shift in the tectonic plates of her emotions. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer than resentment, a space where understanding could potentially grow. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing between them, tentatively at first, and then with increasing ease. He asked her questions, not about her academic achievements or her scientific breakthroughs, but about her as a person. What books did she love? What kind of music did she listen to? What made her laugh? And he told her stories, not about his money or his power, but about the dreams he used to have, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned along the way. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his carefully constructed armor, the vulnerabilities he had hidden beneath layers of success and ambition. And she realized that the man sitting across from her wasn't just a figure from her imagination, a symbol of her absent father. He was real, imperfect, and genuinely trying to atone for his past. At the end of the conversation, she stood up, her shoulders a little less tense, her eyes a little brighter. "I'm not ready for anything yet," she said, her voice still cautious. "But I think I'd like to keep talking." He nodded, his heart swelling with a mixture of relief and hope. "Whenever you want. I'll be here." She walked away slowly, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. The distance between them was still vast, but it no longer felt infinite. Ethan remained on the bench long after she was gone, the wind rustling through the trees, carrying the scent of spring and the promise of a new season. Later that night, Maya returned home and found her mother waiting for her in the kitchen, her face etched with worry. Sarah looked up, searching her daughter's face for a sign, a clue to decipher the complex emotions swirling within her. Maya didn't say anything immediately. She simply walked over to her mother, wrapped her arms around her waist, and hugged her tightly. "He didn't run this time," she said in a low voice, her words a testament to the man who had finally found the courage to face his past. Sarah listened, her heart overflowing with a mixture of hope and trepidation, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. Not because the past could be erased or forgotten, but because the future could be different. What do you believe marked the turning point for Ethan? What role did Maya play in her own path to reconciliation? Share your insights. Part 8. The truth crowns her. The meaningful ending. The months that followed were neither smooth nor easy, but they were characterized by honesty. Maya and Ethan began to meet regularly, sometimes in bustling public spaces where they could observe the ebb and flow of life around them, sometimes in quiet corners of the city where they could talk without feeling the weight of judgmental eyes or suffocating expectations. Their conversations were awkward at first, filled with pregnant pauses and hesitant inquiries. Yet, beneath the surface of uncertainty, there was something solid, a mutual desire to know, to understand, to build a bridge across the chasm of years. Ethan never pressured her, never demanded anything of her. He never asked her to call him Dad, never showered her with extravagant gifts or made empty promises. He simply showed up, time and time again, offering his undivided attention and his unwavering support. Slowly, brick by brick, a pathway began to form between them, a testament to the power of perseverance and the transformative potential of forgiveness. He learned about her childhood, not just the academic achievements and the science fair trophies, but the quiet moments, the small details that painted a vivid picture of her life. He listened intently as she recounted the days she and Sarah spent sewing together in their cramped, cold apartment, the nights they spent huddled together, lost in the pages of beloved books, their only source of light a single, flickering lamp. She told him about the teachers who had believed in her when she doubted herself, the science projects that had ignited her insatiable curiosity, and the constant hunger she had felt not just for food, which was sometimes scarce, but for opportunity, for security, for a space to dream without limits. Ethan listened to every story as if it were a sacred confession, absorbing every word, silently grieving the memories he had missed, but honoring them all the same. Sarah remained cautious, a silent observer on the periphery. She didn't interfere, but she didn't actively engage either. She watched from a distance as Maya cautiously forged this new connection, always ready to catch her if she stumbled, to shield her from any potential heartbreak. There were days when the ghosts of the past resurfaced, like a relentless tide threatening to engulf her, reminding her of the pain, the loneliness, the countless nights she had cried silently while her daughter slept peacefully beside her, oblivious to her mother's silent struggles. But then she would see them, Maya and Ethan sitting in the park, engrossed in conversation, or walking side by side down a quiet street, their heads bent together in shared laughter, and something within her would soften, a thawing of the frozen landscape of her heart. Not complete forgiveness, not entirely, but a glimmer of recognition, a realization that people could change, that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that perhaps some scars were not meant to be erased, but to be understood, to serve as a reminder of the battles fought and the lessons learned. Everything shifted on the night of the National Future Science Awards ceremony. The event was held in a grand hall in New York City, a space usually reserved for senators and esteemed academics, not high school students. Yet, on this particular evening, it was filled with the country's most brilliant young minds, each one a beacon of untapped potential, each one a testament to the power of human ingenuity. Maya had been named one of 3 finalists for her groundbreaking research in sustainable water filtration, a project that had captured the attention of the scientific community and generated a buzz in circles far beyond her reach. Journalists, investors, and university leaders filled the seats, their attention riveted on the stage, eager to witness the unveiling of the next generation of innovators. Maya stood backstage, her nerves humming like a live wire. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, lovingly sewn by Sarah herself, a tangible symbol of her mother's unwavering support. A small, intricately designed molecule-shaped brooch adorned her neckline, a reminder of her passion for science and her commitment to making a difference in the world. When her name was announced, and the crowd erupted in thunderous applause, she walked toward the spotlight with a grace and a poise she never knew she possessed. She spoke without notes, her voice clear and confident, her words resonating with authenticity and conviction. "I stand here today," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, "not as someone who emerged from a background of privilege or perfect circumstances, but as someone who emerged because she was allowed to, because my mother, a woman who worked 3 jobs and never lost hope, believed in me when no one else did. Because the teachers, the mentors, and yes, even the silent strangers who opened doors I could never have opened alone, saw something worth investing in." She paused, her voice catching slightly with emotion. Her eyes moved across the crowd, settling for a brief moment on 2 faces in the front row, 2 faces that represented the complex tapestry of her life. Sarah, her eyes wide with pride and overflowing with tears, and Ethan, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, looking at her not as a benefactor or a symbol of redemption, but simply and completely as a father who had finally found his way back. "I used to believe that pain was something you carried alone," she continued, her voice regaining its strength. "That absence meant finality. That silence was the end of the story. But I have learned that sometimes absence is just a chapter, a necessary detour on the road to self-discovery. And silence is not the absence of communication, but the space where the truth waits patiently to be told." The room was utterly silent, the air thick with anticipation. There were no coughs, no rustling of programs, no shifting in seats, just the collective breath held in 1,000 chests, suspended in a moment of shared humanity. "So, today, I accept this award," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "Not just for myself, but for every girl whose future was doubted, for every mother who gave everything without expecting anything in return, and for every person who has learned that it is never too late to show up, to make amends, to rewrite the ending of their story. The applause was deafening, a roaring wave of appreciation that filled the grand hall. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing the moment for posterity. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, eager to capture the essence of her powerful message. But Maya heard none of it, saw none of it. She walked off the stage and headed straight for the front row, drawn by an irresistible force. Sarah stood up first, her face radiant with pride, and enveloped her daughter in an embrace that spoke of 1,000 sleepless nights, 1,000 moments of unwavering support, and 1,000 more moments of fierce, unconditional love. And then, slowly, hesitantly, Maya turned to Ethan. He rose to his feet, unsure, his face etched with a mixture of hope and trepidation, not knowing if he was allowed this, if he had earned the right to be a part of this moment. But she took a step forward, closed the distance between them, and opened her arms in a silent invitation. He held her carefully, reverently, as if she were the most precious thing in the world, as if he feared she might vanish if he held her too tight. That night, everything changed again, subtly yet irrevocably. The headlines blazed with her success. Asterisk teen innovator captures nation's heart. Maya Hayes, the girl who designed a future. Asterisk but to her, the moment that mattered most came hours later, in a quiet hotel room overlooking the twinkling lights of the city, where she sat nestled between her mother and her father, eating takeout from paper boxes and laughing at something that wasn't even funny. They didn't talk about the past, didn't rehash old wounds or dredge up painful memories. They didn't need to. They were building something new, something stronger, something that would endure. In the months that followed, Maya began her freshman year at MIT, embarking on a new chapter in her academic journey. Sarah, inspired by her daughter's resilience and her unwavering belief in the power of education, opened a foundation for young single mothers, offering legal assistance, affordable housing, and scholarships in fashion design, empowering them to pursue their dreams and build a better future for themselves and their children. Ethan, finally understanding the true meaning of success, established the Maya Hayes Innovation Fund for underprivileged youth in science and technology, providing them with the resources and mentorship they needed to unlock their potential and make a lasting impact on the world. The three of them were not a traditional family, not the picture-perfect ideal often portrayed in movies and magazines, but they were a family nonetheless, bound together by love, respect, and a shared commitment to truth, effort, and the unwavering belief in the power of second chances. They were a testament to the fact that some wounds never completely disappear, but that sometimes those wounds become the places where the light gets in, illuminating the path forward and transforming pain into purpose. Redemption, they learned, is a long and arduous journey, not a destination to be reached. Unlike a fairy tale ending, this story does not erase the pain of the past, but it honors it, acknowledging the struggles and celebrating the resilience of the human spirit. Ethan's reunion with his daughter is not a magical transformation, but the result of his persistent effort, his quiet acts of service, and her courageous decision to face the truth and offer him a second chance. What makes this ending so profound and so impactful is that it is not simply about receiving forgiveness, but about demonstrating genuine transformation, earning the right to presence, and embracing the messy, imperfect beauty of human connection. This story reminds us that despite our mistakes, no matter how deep or how damaging, there is always an opportunity for change, for growth, for redemption. It is a story about the enduring power of love, the unwavering strength of an unbroken mother, the brilliance of a daughter who refuses to be defined by her past, and the humility of a man who finally learns the true meaning of success, not in terms of wealth or power, but in terms of connection, purpose, and the unwavering commitment to show up, time and time again, for the people who matter most. Asterisk, what are your thoughts on this ending? Do you believe redemption is truly possible in situations like this? Should Sarah forgive Ethan completely? Share your opinions in the comments below. Asterisk, would you like me to tell you another story of redemption?